Hi, I'm Matt from Tubby Tarot. Welcome back to another book chat. Hello, welcome back. Today I want to tell you about three of the weirdest books in my personal book collection. They might not surprise any of you, and perhaps most of you haven't heard of at least two of them, but I want to share this with you. And the first book that I'm going to tell you about is a book called Incest, and it is a book written by a guy called the Marquis de Sade. Now, if you don't know anything about the Marquis de Sade, the word sadism is derived from the Marquis de Sade, okay? Now, everyone is like, this is the book here. Everybody is like, oh my gosh, okay, this book is all about incest and, father-daughter love and that sort of thing. Well, yes and no. Strangely enough, this book is more about the political situation in France at the time, which was, I think, about the 1700s, late 1700s. And it's very much like, I don't know if any of you have seen a movie called The Serbian Film. Very, very hardcore film, very sort of extreme. But that film tried to depict in graphic detail the way that the Serbian people and the Serbian land was being treated. And this book, in the same way, is the way that French people, especially the French literate sort of cognoscenti, the top literate people of the day were treating other people. And it was a very kind of incestuous relationship in that if you were a good writer, you would only hang out with good writers, and only good writers would kind of applaud you, kind of like the Oscars are today. But this is what this book is all about. So it isn't about an incestuous relationship between a father and daughter, but it is more about the underlying story is actually about the way that the cognoscenti was treating everybody else. Okay, so very interesting read, very, very weird read, and that's incredibly sexually bizarre, but worth getting if you can. It is available online for free. Now, the next really, really weird book I've got is a book by a guy called Oliver Onions. Yes, I know it's a really strange name, but he actually wrote a lot of really, really cool stuff. This is really the only book of his that I've got, and it's the most famous one that he wrote, and it is called The Beckoning Fair One. And it is a truly frightening, it's frightening in the way that the turn of the screw was frightening, and that it's not about ghosts and ghouls and demons and things. It could all be happening in the main character's head. And just a quick synopsis. This guy buys a old abandoned house, and you can't understand why he's getting it so cheaply. Because nobody wanted to stay there, and the reason nobody wanted to stay there is because there's this entity in the house that kind of makes you believe that you're completely in love with the house, and eventually it stops you from going out. So your emotional attachment to the house becomes, our main character, he becomes so attached to the house that eventually at the end of the book he doesn't even want to go out of the house. And they actually, I will spoil it because I don't think any of you are going to read it, they actually find him a few weeks later, like a few weeks after he buys the house, they find him dead in the house, but he's been dead since like 2 days before 2 days after he bought the house. So it's really a bit of a mind fuck as far as time goes. The author plays he plays with your mind as far as time goes. The story that he's telling is actually after the man is dead, so it becomes very complicated. And it's a very short book. And let me tell you something, this will seriously mess with your head as far as time, jumping around between times go. But it's a very good book. It's called The Beckoning Fair One, and it's by Oliver Onions. It's also really, really weird. Now, the third book is going to come as a bit of a surprise to you people, especially my American friends, because the third book that I find incredibly weird and very disturbing for some reason is a small book. It was written by a guy called Washington Irving, who was a very, very famous and prolific American author, wrote some incredible stuff. But I think his most famous is a book called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Tiny little short story, and it is about this priggish and rather stuck up sort of clerk, okay, and he falls madly in love with one of the the sort of young girls in the area. But she, of course, is in love with one of the big butch farmhands. Anyway, the clerk kind of woos her, and he goes to her with flowers, and he goes to her with poetry, and the big butch farmhand is getting like quite pissed off about this, and he warns him, he says to him, stay away from my girl, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, what they do is one night, the main sort of priggish, stuck-up clerk character, he goes off and he is riding back to his house, and he has to cross this bridge. And there are all these tales about this bridge, that the headless horseman will come and take your soul. He'll kill you on the bridge, and he'll take your soul and then ride off into the sunset with your soul. And of course, this makes our main character like really nervous. He's a nervous little guy anyway, so it makes him really nervous. And anyway, the next minute he sees the headless horseman, and he gallops away, and the horseman is holding his head in his hand, and there's all this fire coming out of the head, and it's glowing, and this poor little, our poor clerk just hightails it out of there, and they never ever see him again. And of course, what actually happened was it was this big butch farmer and his friends who were playing a practical joke on him, and they had, instead of the head, it was actually a Halloween pumpkin with candles in it. So it's actually a practical joke book, but I just found this book really disturbing. I found it really disturbing because of the main character. And he's just so utterly wrapped up in himself. And I also found this book very strange in that the guys who play this trick, it's actually a really, really vicious trick. And although this is a very funny book in a lot of ways, it's actually quite a vicious book. And I think it's a very strange book, a very strange story. It's very much a Halloween story that you would tell around the campfire, because there's a good chance of kind of like getting one of your mates to come behind everyone and scare them. But yeah, that's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. So they are my three strangest books, in my opinion, in my collection. It's the Marquis de Sade, he wrote Incest. Then we have Oliver Onions, The Beckoning Fair One. And of course, Washington Irving with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Let me know below, what are your three weirdest books? I'm not talking about your favorites or your most hated. Comment below, what are the three weirdest books in your collection that you have actually read? I'm Matt from Tubby Tarot, and I will see you next week for some more book chat.